Tekken has had a long history. The series is over 30 years old and has been constantly growing and evolving with each iteration of the game. Coming into Tekken 8, it seemed like the developers had a very specific vision when looking at how they would change certain legacy characters in this brand new title. If you've seen or been a part of any discourse in the 10 months of Tekken 8's life, you've probably heard people talking about the simplification of certain characters in this game. Basically, a lot of people think Tekken 8 has dumbed down some of the characters compared to their Tekken 7 and previous counterparts. Today, we're going to be looking at 3 specific examples of this found within the game that I think best represents the developers' new approach to character design here. One, I think, is an example of the right reasons to simplify a character, the other, an example of doing it wrong, and the third one being a happy accident. These characters, of course, being Jin, the character I'm sure you've all heard way too much about, the much lesser discussed Martial Law, and the current king of Tekken 8 and White Angel of Death, Dragunov. What makes these characters so much easier and simple to play compared to previous versions of them? And more importantly, why did the developers choose to change these beloved characters? What was their design philosophy behind making these changes? And again, did it work out for them? That's what we're going to be talking about today, so let's get into it. Starting off with the hero himself, Jin Kazama. Jin is almost unrecognizable these days compared to even his Tekken 7 iteration. And the further you go back, the more unrecognizable this guy gets. In Tekken 3 and Tekken Tag 1, he functioned as a normal Mishima. He had all of Kazuya's tools like the 112, normal electric, traditional hell sweep. He basically functioned like Kazuya or Devil Jin today. In Tekken 4, he denounced the Mishima style, and instead adapted his now well-known style of karate, with a hint of Mishima of course. He kept the Wave Dash and Hell Sweep, but lost the 112, and also lost the traditional Electric Wind God Fist. He was instead given the Electric Wind Hook Fist, which functioned almost nothing like it does today. It didn't launch at all until Tekken 6, where it became a counter hit launcher, and Tekken 7, where it became a normal hit launcher for the first time. In Tekken 8, a lot of this has changed. His Wind God Fist now launches without needing the electric, thus removing the execution requirement to get a launch. His poking has been buffed tremendously, with him essentially doubling the range of his jab and down forward 1, where in previous games, this was one of his biggest weaknesses. Not anymore. Jin was heavily simplified, mainly through him receiving new moves that served to streamline his offense. In Tekken 7, Jin had 3 main lows that needed to work together very well in synergy with each other. His down back 4, his down 4, and of course his launching Hell Sweep. These all had a time and place to be used effectively, and this was part of what made the character so difficult in the first place. This guy just had a lot of tools. He was one of the characters who actually used the majority of his moveset. Each move had a very specific purpose, in which it would be a strong option, and part of what made him so incredibly difficult was understanding this toolkit and when to use each move. When to use his evasion, when to use his parry, when to use his risky counter hit tools, when to throw in an electric. He was agreed upon as being one of the most difficult and complicated characters in Tekken 7. In Tekken 8, he is not. He was given a new move, his down 2, which pretty much removed the need to use almost all of his other lows in tandem with each other, because his down 2 is just so strong compared to all the others that there's really no need to use everything else nearly as much. Jin getting a safe, evasive, low counter hit launcher makes him simpler in so many ways. His Demon Paw was also mega buffed. Before, you actually needed to, hit the move for it to connect. Now it has ridiculous phantom range, and it tracks decently well. This move dominates the neutral and makes him so much simpler. There's so much less to think about when you can just press one button wherever your opponent is and they have to respect you. On top of this, he was given a bunch of new moves in Tekken 8 that the character really didn't need. A Devil Jin Samsara? Why? A tracking safe Power Crush high heat engager? Free electrics out of stance? It's pretty clear to me they wanted to make him much easier in this game. Like I said earlier, his poking went from one of the worst in the game to one of the best, and a huge amount of the character's execution was trashed. In Tekken 7, comboing off of a counter hit forward 4 was incredibly difficult. If you wanted to do a very easy combo, you would have to proactively commit into going into his stance before you even knew if the forward 4 connected, leaving you right in your opponent's face, ready to be launched. No one ever did this outside a very low level. No. If you wanted to combo off of his forward 4, you would need to either learn how to Zen cancel, a very technical mechanic Jin has that's basically been removed in Tekken 8, or learn how to walk up in a perfect wave dash to do the combo without any stances. This was one of the hardest staple combos in the entire game. Not exaggerating when I say that. I've been struggling to do this for like 5 years. And here in Tekken 8, his forward 4 has been made very, very easy to combo off of. You literally just walk up and press back 3. These are just a few of the things that I believe serve to simplify the character to a major extent. But why did they do all this? Sorry to quickly interrupt this video, but if you guys are enjoying this and want to see more longer scripted Tekken 8 content like this in the future, please consider subscribing to the channel. It goes such a long way in helping me fight the YouTube algorithm and work towards my dream of hopefully one day doing this as a full-time job. Only about 21% of the people who watch my videos are actually subscribed, though it really is a big help. It's free to do and it only takes 1 second of your time. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the video. Well, this is where I have to actually agree with the developers. Even though I love Tekken 7 Jin and prefer him over the simpler Tekken 8 variation, if you ask me, it makes perfect sense why they would do this. In most games, the box art cover protagonists serve as easy crowd-pleasing characters. Characters you can play in the story mode and then pick up relatively easily afterward. Almost every fighting game does this. The protagonists are always easy to play. The Shotos in Street Fighter, Soul in Guilty Gear, Terry in King of Fighters, hell, even Mario in Smash Bros. This is an industry norm, and Tekken has always strayed away from this industry norm, with their protagonists, being the Mishimas, being among the most difficult characters, not only in their game, but in any fighting game, really. And while I think it's a very interesting concept, it mostly just serves to reward legacy players. I don't think it's a good business move if they want to grow the franchise. Jin is the hero of the story. He's the character casual players are going to be playing the most, and he's one of the most recognizable characters in the game, along with his father. New players are naturally going to gravitate towards this guy, so why make their lives so difficult? It makes perfect sense wanting to make him simpler to play. Honestly, I'm surprised it took 30 years for them to simplify one of the main Mishimas. I would have thought they would have done this years ago, to be honest. Think about it, it's really a win-win for everyone. Jin becomes more accessible, serving to bring in way more new players and help people get into Tekken with a cool Mishima, without the typical insane investment time needed. But if you're a legacy player who likes the typical difficult Mishima gameplay, Kazuya is still right there, Devil Jin as well. And now, if you want a difficult but modern and unique character, you also have Reina. You even have Heihachi now, he's one of the hardest characters in the game. If you just want a difficult character, there's plenty of options for Mishima players. Making just one of them simplified really helps. As much as I hate to say it, Jin being simplified was a good choice. Now, him being broken right now is a whole other story, and definitely not a good choice, but we'll save that for another time. Martial Law is without a doubt one of the most iconic characters in the Tekken series, having appeared in every installment besides the two where he was replaced by his son. The Bruce Lee-inspired fighter has made a big impact on the series. Law in previous Tekken games has been considered an incredibly difficult character to play. While the character has always had a lot of the cheese you know and love in Tekken 8, Junkyard, he actually previously had some of the biggest execution demands out of any character in Tekken. His signature stance, introduced in Tekken 4, the DSS, previously required near-perfect timing to transition to after his moves. This was entirely removed in Tekken 8, and can now be accessed simply by holding forward, and he'll automatically go into stance. A lot of new players don't understand the significance here, but his DSS requiring execution was a huge part of the character. Veterans had been practicing it for decades, and Law players took extreme pride in being able to do instant DSSs, doing them in combos, for pressure, for whatever. It really served as a core aspect of Law's identity. By removing this, they removed a big sense of progress for the character. I think more than almost any other character, the skill ceiling on Law was really important for him. Let's be honest, this character doesn't have the greatest reputation. Wi-Fi laws are literally one of the biggest memes in the Tekken community. This character has a ridiculous amount of cheese. Random low-high strings, a million setups that launch you. He's one of the most flowcharty and gimmicky characters in the game at a low level. But what made him so interesting was that seeing a Law in high-level play always demanded a level of respect for the player. Even new players who absolutely hated Law knew about how difficult he was in competitive play. This was largely because of the execution required to optimize the character. There was a major difference between newer Law players and veterans that made the character so much more interesting in my opinion. There's a lot of other stuff that's been simplified too. His slide keeps its iconic input, which actually requires a little execution, but it's now been given a very easy way to do it, simply by holding down forward in DSS and then pressing 4. Yeah, his mix-up and pressure game has been simplified a lot. You'll still need the regular input to slide neutral, but this is a big help for his accessibility, and serves to simplify him even more. In Tekken 8, he has little to no execution in his combos now, and has a similar level of what we call streamlined offense to the other top tiers. He was given way more easy stance transitions, a ton of super broken tools that no character should really have, like his 1-1 string being a hit confirmable counter hit launcher while in heat. He was given nunchucks acting like a steel pedal and a counter hit launcher, making his offense a lot simpler in my opinion, and probably a ton of other stuff I'm forgetting. Law is interesting because, like I said earlier, to some extent, he's always been easy. He's had some of the easiest, most cheesy stuff in Tekken, and also somehow some of the most difficult, and I really liked his character design in previous games. It seemed like they leaned heavily into the easy part here in Tekken 8, and this one sucks to see. I get why they did it to an extent. Law is a very popular character, especially in casual play and lower ranks, so removing some of the skill ceiling has certainly helped more players pick him up and succeed with the character, but I don't find this one to be nearly as important or needed as the simplification of Jin, and I can't see a good reason why they did this. He was already a beginner-friendly character, he just had a skill ceiling. He had something to work towards, while still having a ton of cheese and easy stuff that new players would love. They had the perfect balance. What do they gain by getting rid of this? It just serves to upset veteran players, but not even change anything for the average new player, because again, the average new player wasn't doing this difficult stuff, and the average new player didn't need to. It wasn't really on their mind. It's not like Jin, where to play the character, you needed all this difficult stuff. No, he's always been the perfect mix of both. So why remove one core side of him? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I think this is an example of simplifying a character for the wrong reasons, when it definitely was not required. The final character we're going to be talking about is Sergei Dragunov himself. Dragunov is a very weird example, as the character has changed so much when compared to Tekken 7. But a huge part of this is just because of how strong and streamlined he's become. For the first couple seasons of Tekken 7, Dragunov was very strong, until getting absolutely nerfed into the ground and becoming one of the weakest characters in the game for the remaining lifespan of Tekken 7. And was actually considered very simplified, even back then. In Tekken Tag 2, comboing off of his while running 2 took a ton of execution, and the character overall lost a ton of technical skill coming into Tekken 7. Pretty much all of his combos used to be very demanding and were made much simpler in Tekken 7. But despite this, by the end of the game's life, he was still actually considered a difficult character, for a couple reasons we'll go over. First off, was just because of how weak he was for most of the game. After his nerfs, he really struggled to do just about anything. He had awful tracking, terrible hitboxes on all of his attacks, and almost no lows to threaten with. This meant Dragunov players had to work very hard to get any pressure started, and even once they did, they weren't rewarded with that much. The other reason he was so difficult was his execution. I'm sure you all know about Dragunov's iconic while running 2. Super long range, very plus on block, it's like the bread and butter to his kit. Well, before Tekken 8, doing an instant while running attack was incredibly demanding. Most people couldn't do it, and it would take some years of practice to get it down consistently. And Dragunov's while running 2 was his most important move by far. Being able to do an instant while running 2 while standing right next to your opponent was basically essential for the character, and was very difficult to do. You needed to press it incredibly quick. These two factors instantly made Dragunov an intermediate character, at least according to the vast majority of the Tekken community. Here in Tekken 8, most people consider him to be pretty brain dead and easy to play. The main reason for this is just how overtuned the character's become. He kind of has a similar effect to Jin, where he's just been made so strong that the character automatically becomes more simplified. There's just less stuff to worry about when characters get so many broken tools. Why worry about perfectly executing his pressure when you can just spam sneak 4? Why worry about bad hitboxes when every single one of them has been fixed? Why worry about tracking when he's received better tracking on virtually every move? You don't have to worry about lows anymore because he now has a hatchet kick and full crouch down forward 1, serving to complement his aggression. There's so much here that makes him way more simple to play. And of course the other reason being the removal of his execution. This isn't a direct change to Dragunov, but rather is a result of the system change in Tekken 8. While running attacks have become far easier to do in this game when compared to previous Tekken games. You can just press forward 3 times, not even that fast in front of your opponent, and now you'll get a while running attack in this game. The difference in execution here is night and day. People would spend so much time trying to master his instant while running 2, and now pretty much anyone can do it. Dragunov is actually the only character here who I believe is not a result of intentional simplification. While I think Jin and Law were specifically looked at by the development team with the intentions of making them easier to appeal to a broader demographic of players, for better or for worse, I think Dragunov really just was an accident. I'm sure the developers knew that they were making Dragunov far stronger in this game than ever before, but I can't see them doing just that to make him appeal to new players. If there was one or more other direct changes, then maybe, but the while running change was a universal system mechanic, not something specifically made for Dragunov. Overall, I don't actually hate what they've done to him in this game. I like the idea of having a stronger Dragunov, who is the perfect tournament character. He's powerful, he's easy to play, and he's consistent. Every fighting game needs strong competitive characters like this. The only problem with him now is he's just too strong. I think they could fix a lot of the character's issues simply by giving him 1 or 2 more key nerfs. Honestly, if they just reduced the plus frames on Sneak 4 and made it no longer hit grounded, this alone would make great progress in making the character feel a lot more fun to fight. Because again, he's just too strong right now for how easy he is to pilot. When it comes to the while running execution, this is something I do also agree with. I was never a big fan of while running attacks being so difficult to do in Tekken 8. It just seems like an odd universal thing to lock behind so much execution, especially when so many characters in the game rely on their while running moves. While running moves are some of the strongest moves in the game. It's just one of those things I'm not super attached to being very execution heavy. I really didn't care for it being difficult before, and I think it's a good change to make it easier. The idea of simplifying characters is one that Tekken veteran players are instinctively against, and it's pretty easy to see why. So many people in this community have been playing the game for decades, and change is scary, especially when it comes to changing characters in a 30-year-long running fighting game. People are attached to these characters and have dedicated hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of hours on them. And the idea of all of your work going down the drain simply because the developers decide to remove execution or simplify the character is understandably scary. I get it. That being said, I think people need to be able to acknowledge that, while also acknowledging why the developers did what they did. Simplifying a character like Jin may have upset serious competitive players, but it did so much to popularize the character, and honestly served to probably get a huge amount of new players into competitive Tekken. It made the character more accessible for the first time in history, letting hundreds of thousands of people play this awesome character for the first time. Competitive players only make up a tiny percentage of the community, so it's important to remember that not all developer decisions are going to directly benefit competitive players. Sometimes they just need to cater to the majority. I mean, they are a business after all. I think Jin is an example of smart simplification, while Law is a perfect example of simplifying a character unnecessarily for the wrong reasons. Removing his execution really didn't do anything besides piss off the pro players who had been practicing it for so long. Dragunov was really just a happy accident, or an unhappy accident depending on who you ask, and I'm hoping we see more changes to him soon. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've got for today's video. Make sure to let me know in the comments your thoughts on this whole thing. Do you agree with their decision to simplify these characters, or are you adamantly against it in every game? Let me know. I'll be down there chatting with you guys as always. If you guys enjoyed this and want to see more scripted Tekken 8 content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. It goes a really long way. As always, huge thanks to my YouTube members and Patreon patrons. Your support means the world to me. I couldn't do this without you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to join my Discord server if you want to join a growing community and talk to me and other Tekken players. The link is in the description and the pinned comment, and I will see you guys later. Take it easy.